Wight County School Board is back in session. Madam Clerk, can you take another roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Colick.
Present.
Mrs. Perkins. Here. Mr. Wooster.
Here.
And Mr. Marsh.
Here. And Mr. Wooster, can we the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move to if I can speak, I move for the approval of the agenda or amendments for open session.
I second it.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take a vote.
Mr. Colick.
Yes.
Mrs. Perkins. Yes. Mr. Wooster.
Yes.
And Mr. Marsh.
Yes.
I think when I took roll, I did not say Mr. Cunningham, so Mr. Cunningham.
All right. So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And so for the audience, because we technically have two meetings, we had a public hearing, and now we're going to roll into a work session. So we're going to kick off our, as required by Virginia law, public hearing for the FY 24-25 Wight County Schools budget. And on that, I think I'm just going to turn it over to you, Dr. Kramer, to kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. Chairman Marsh, Mr. Vice Chair Wooster, members of the board, and community members. Board members, as you will recall, I shared the superintendent's budget presentation on February 22nd, approximately 1 month ago at the initial work session. Therefore, I will not provide an extensive presentation this evening. I would much prefer ensuring that the majority of the time this evening is allotted to the board for questions. I would, however, like to begin by acknowledging and thanking all of those who've worked on preparing the FY25 proposed operating budget. We'd like to recognize the stakeholder groups who were instrumental in the development of the 25 proposed operating budget. I thank our central office staff members, our principals and school teams. I thank the superintendent advisories, and I thank those members of the community who provided input. I especially thank our interim CFOs, Dr. Jim Roberts and Mr. Steve Jenkins, as two veteran and experienced CFOs for all that they've done leading the development of the budget book and this process in a very short time period. I truly do not know what we would have done without these two gentlemen. Dr. Roberts is here with us this evening and will assist with the presentation and with answering questions. Because of a prior commitment, Mr. Jenkins is unable to be with us this evening. Board members, the Code of Virginia Section 22.1-92 states that it shall be the duty of each division superintendent to prepare with the approval of the school board and submit to the governing body or bodies appropriate funds for the school division. The estimate of the amount of money deemed to be needed during the next fiscal year for support of the public schools of the school division. The Wight County Schools FY 2025 proposed operating budget represents the school division's plans for the activities that will take place for the next school year 2024-2025. The proposed operating budget provides an estimated cost to complete those activities planned for the next fiscal year. School board members, you are certainly aware of this fact, but I note this information for members of the community, that upon review, approval, and/or modification by the school board, a budget is submitted to the Isle of Wight Board of Supervisors for consideration. Funds are only made available once the Board of Supervisors approves the operating budget and appropriates the funds. As I've stated before, please know that the requested proposed budget items we will share were developed through numerous meetings with students, teachers, principals, central office staff, and community stakeholders. As we discuss the needs of our division in the proposed FY25 operating budget, I think it is important for us to remind ourselves of our school division's vision and mission statements, enabling every child to discover their gifts and talents, and to ensure that each child is college, career, and life ready. Essentially, we're saying that when our students leave our schools, they should be fully prepared to pursue whatever path they choose. As slide 3 states, budgets are spending plans. They are a working document, and budgets must be flexible to address unanticipated changes and priorities. As it pertains to priorities, as we discuss the budget, please know that there will be some priorities and required expenses. For example, the increase in utilities, employee health care, contracted services, and debt services, the Virginia retirement system funding requirements, are an example of essential needs that must be funded. And there are other costs that are critically important and require our immediate attention. The need for a large number of buses to replace our aging fleet, track and tennis court repairs, and unexpected capital needs to address unexpected repairs of our aging infrastructure and facilities, the Carrollton HVAC needs, to name a few. And to remain competitive, it is essential that we offer our employees fair and comparable salaries to our neighboring counties and school divisions. As a result, we're requesting a 3% salary increase for our employees. Board members and members of the community, it is important to note that we are awaiting final numbers from state officials. The General Assembly's budget has not been signed by the governor at this point. Therefore, we are having to make projections based upon what we expect to receive. We're using the most conservative estimates to build our budget. So some of these numbers will change once we get final budget numbers from the state. The superintendents in the region were informed in a regional superintendents meeting just this week by Virginia Department of Education officials that we will receive an update on state funding early next week. Therefore, we hope that we will be able to provide you with a little more information in the coming days. At this time, I will ask our interim CFO, Dr. Roberts, to briefly review the revenue estimates and provide a very brief look at our requested major changes before we prepare for the board's questions. Mr. Roberts, Dr. Roberts, pardon.
Thank you, Dr. Kramer. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the board, I'll quickly review some of the more important parts of the superintendent's proposed operating, grant, and special fund budgets. This slide provides a look at the revenue estimates for the year in comparison to the revised estimates of fiscal year 24. The state is going up less than $2.3 million. Sales tax is almost level, and that puts us in the position of increasing the contribution of local funding. Federal fund estimates are projected to go up a small amount, and other local revenue is projected to be less, although I will tell you we're looking at that actual other local revenue, and it may go up before you take final action on Tuesday. The next few slides provide some of the major changes in expenditures. The salary increases you see here are 3% and the teacher's step raise, and they include fringe benefits. As Dr. Kramer indicated, the 3% was included to keep us up with projected salary increases in local divisions. Hiring the best teacher is the most important job we have. The health insurance increase reflects the shortfall for this year and an early estimate of rate changes that will be brought to you later. The remaining items here are some of the other changes in other salary lines throughout the budget. Major changes in general fund. We've got an increase in the CSEP Governor School, and that is based on the requested amount of tuition that we have to pay, and we had a shortfall in this year we had to make up. Instructional materials, purchase services are going up, staff development up a little bit, and then a new after-school program. In the operations area, we have 5 school buses. We have contracted maintenance going up, primarily because we're increasing some custodians in that contract and a small increase in the contract. And of course, utilities are going up because you have to pay for those. New positions, we have 17, most of them in the area of instruction. You see the teachers there and where they're located, and the IAs at special ed, which is always a need, the accountant that was mentioned, and then the library assistants and the patient care technician instructor. This is a calendar for the remainder of the budget presentations and voting, and as you can see, we will hopefully get approval on the 26th. Then the Board of Supervisors will receive our recommendation, hopefully vote on that, and then we will get back to the school board for approval of the final amended budget in May. And we do hope that some of the changes that the General Assembly made will come to us long before it did last year. If you remember, it was September before we got an actual state budget. So that's the schedule we're looking at, and now this staff and I will be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roberts. For the board, I believe Mr. Collick and Mr. Wooster and I have talked about this separately. Ms. Perkins, unless you have any objections, I propose that each school board member, we just go around the table and ask our questions and get those out of the way. And then once everybody's comfortable with asking the questions, we can go into recess or adjourn. And over the weekend, we can take the budget, do some prioritization, send it to me as the chair separately, and we'll collaborate. And in the interim, Dr. Kramer has offered that if anybody has questions or specific concerns or wants to sit down one-on-one to go into some of the numbers in detail, he has made himself and the staff available for that. So, okay. So then on that, I'll just turn it over. Anyone want to go first?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
Go for it, Mr. Collett.
Okay, so, Dr. Roberts, page 28 starts the general fund by function, instructional services. So up top, we've got the FY24 budget, and next to it is the FY25 proposal. Is that reflective of the 3%? Or on the major changes sheet on page 26A, is that an addition to what we have listed on page 28 under the FY25 proposal?
Yes, sir. That does reflect the increase in wages.
Okay, so when we're going from 28,570 to 3,800 and
Yes.
change, that is the 3%?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm not adding in from the major changes?
It's the 3% in this particular area, plus a step for teachers.
Correct. Okay, okay. That was my biggest single question that we had there. And one thing I want to make sure everybody's aware, from my perspective, pretty much everything that Dr. Kramer and her staff is asking for is very valid. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of money. So if I say I'm opposed to something, I'm not necessarily opposed to it in a dictionary sense. I am opposed to it because we only have so much money to spend or allocate. So we've got to be very careful on how we do that. And I do not want to basically put the Board of Supervisors in a corner where they're saying no. I want to make sure we're working hand in glove with them. So we're letting them know what our priorities are, what we need, while at the same time we're not backing them in a corner to say no. So I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So if I say I'm opposed to something, I'm opposed to it because we don't have the money for it. Now, I do have a myriad of questions, and I will have more questions as we go through this during the night. But my first question is on a breakdown of employee benefits. I know there's required payments that the county or the school division has to pay for different benefits, and there's also some that the employees typically pay. Some of them we pick up. So I'd like to know what the breakdown is on those benefits where there's a cost share, and what we're required to pay and what we actually pay. And I'm looking particularly at the medical. Okay.
Yes, so you had asked previously about the percentage that we pay, and so in looking at, so we offer 4 different plans of health insurance for our employees, and I know you specifically had asked as well for a comparison with our local county government in terms of the types of plans that they offer and the premiums that they pay, their employer portion versus the employee. And so I did get some communication with them in terms of what their rates are. Our insurance that they offer in our insurance, we are self-funded. They do the local choice. So it's not an apples comparison in terms of necessarily the coverage that we are each getting.
Correct.
But we do offer a low deductible plan in the same way that they offer a low deductible plan.
Right.
And we also offer a high deductible and they offer a high deductible. However, their rates are based off of their low deductible plan, the percentage that they give. And so I did do a cross comparison of that for you. They provide, so we typically health insurance plans, you have the employee only option, the employee plus one or spouse option, and then a family coverage. For the employee only, they cover 92% of the premium for their employees, and we cover 79%. For the employee plus spouse, they cover 90% of the premium, and we cover 65%. Okay. And for the family coverage, they cover 78%, and we cover 64%. And that's for the low deductible. Both of them are $500 deductible plans, and they're both Anthem.
Okay, so when we elected over the last year or so to absorb the employees' costs, so we picked up a little bit more to help them out because they were paying a higher amount than their colleagues in the county, basically. Is that right?
So our percentage of coverage has remained the same over the last several years. So when our insurance has come back during our renewal, the rates have increased, and we have continued to absorb the equal amounts percentage-wise. That doesn't mean necessarily that the employees didn't go up, but it means that percentage-wise, we didn't start giving more of a percentage of that coverage to the employee. We maintained that same percentage.
And that is the plan, the hope for this budget season, correct?
So we have, we just got a renewal last week, or this week. We met with our third-party vendor, and they gave us the quotes at what the renewal cost would be. We've asked for them to put together several different models of premium rates for you all to have feedback on. Right. One of them is for 100% of any increases to come to us, so meaning that we would maintain that same percentages that I just shared with you. Right. For the employee to pick up 100% of that, right. For us to do a 50-50 split, and for us to do 75-20 on the increases. Okay, so the will we have on the slide the employee health insurance $781,000, so that is basically to keep status quo for right now, correct? Yes, that is for a portion. If from the numbers that are in the budget book, if we were to stick with that number, we would be maintaining the same percentage coverage that we are right now. Okay. Which is lower than our partners.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, it will increase the cost for the employer and the employee. The cost will go up. The percentage would remain the same.
Sure.
Okay.
Understood. Mr. Chair?
If I could piggyback on that. So just what's the general feedback from the employees? Everybody happy with their insurance? Is the status quo sufficient?
I would say in the last several years, no one is happy with their insurance. Insurance plans that were available 15 years ago are not, they're just not there anymore. And so I think people always feel like coverage could be better. It's hard when you go to the doctor, for your child and you walk away with a $200 bill, even though you're paying monthly premiums every month to help offset that. And so I think definitely our employees would like, better coverage at a lower cost. So. Sure.
Can I just add something really quick, Mr. Marsh? I think over the years, and I've been here for a long time, we have seen sometimes when the rates go up and we pass those on to employees, they may get a raise, but the raise is eaten up by an insurance increase. I think that is very unpopular, and it doesn't help us be as competitive as we could be with other divisions. So I would really caution passing on a full amount to the employee.
Yeah, for example, I was looking at compare, because typically when I make a job offer, I'm sharing them with them what their compensation is going to be, and then I also go over the benefits. And especially for someone who this is not their first job, they are doing a comparison with what they're currently getting and then what we're able to offer them. And there are a couple of local divisions that do offer, if you pick the employee only, they cover 100% of that cost for you. And so that's a great option, especially for our employees that are on the lower end of the pay scale. If they're an employee only and they can have that 100% covered, it helps offset the lower pay of their less experienced years. And so that's always a benefit. So there are other divisions locally that are doing those kinds of things and covering 100%. So I would definitely say increasing the percentage that the employee has to cover, it would not be recommended moving forward.
Okay. Thanks, ladies. And I'll go back to you, Mr. Collett.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, next, Ms. Sullivan, this is probably for you as well. So I'm still on page 28 of the budget book. And when we're looking at the FTEs, is that 537.28, is that the current FTE, or is that the end FTE that we are hoping within this budget? I can't tell.
That would include any of the new positions.
All the new positions? Okay, then what I would like to get, Dr. Kramer, is basically a list of not a list, more of a table. It can be broken out exactly like this, only a shorter version. Instructional services, this many FTEs in 2022, this many in 2023, 24, just so we can see the growth. Okay, I think that's important to see and to fully understand the budget. And actually just from 23, 24, and this would be the proposed.
So to get the difference between 23 and 24 and the 20, this proposed would just be to subtract the ones that are on that additional positions, but we can certainly do that for you in each one of those categories.
Yeah, if you would.
Okay.
I mean, it could be a very small chart with,
Okay.
Probably about half a dozen lines. That it's important for me to be able to understand that. Now, when we're developing the salaries and wages, now I would expect, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Roberts, that we probably use the pay of the employees that we currently have, and then for positions that are not full or we're projecting, how did we project that pay to include it within the budget?
Yes, you're right. Mr. Jenkins was able to pull the exact salary of every employee, apply the raise to it, and total to the wages and salaries. He used an average salary for the new positions and the vacant positions.
Outstanding. Okay, next question. What does the term miscellaneous mean with all that money next to it? It's in a bunch of different places. I can tell you which line it is, I believe. Is it 30? No, that's purchase services.
There's one on page 30 at line 58.
Yes. And that is number 58 is, and the reason I ask is there's a number of places where that actually goes pretty high. For example, under the category 6110, which is classroom instruction. In 23, we had $13,000 in miscellaneous expenses.
Mr. Collett, would you share the page so that we can follow along?
Sure. That would be on page 28. I also have it in a spreadsheet here. Is how I developed the percentages. So we start off with 23. We got 13,000 and change. We go to 24, we have 18,000 and change. And then in 25, the proposal is $52,000. So we went from 23 to 24 with a 38% increase, and now from 24 to 25 with a 187% increase. And I'm just curious, what is that? What are we going to be spending that kind of money on, and why are we going up so high?
Yes, so it's a really good question, Mr. Colick. And the way that the budget was grouped when Mr. Jenkins ran these reports, he broke them up into what Munis identifies as functions and activities. So essentially these wages and salaries, substitute pay, the ones that you see are how they're broken out in Munis.
Yeah.
It groups different orgs and objects together into these different categories. I don't think anyone here loved the word miscellaneous either. What you can do, though, is there's a spreadsheet that has every single org and object behind it, every single budget line. It's, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. But what we can do is we can identify what specific org and objects. I don't have the spreadsheet with me, but certainly we can identify those at a later time to show you, hey, these are exactly what is behind those different activities.
Yeah, what I'm looking for this evening, though, is what is generally behind it. I don't need the specifics, but what types of things, because you're asking us for a 187% increase. We've got to have a little bit more knowledge about it, tonight.
I think we're going to have to get back to you on that one. Mr. Jenkins is not available tonight, and he did pull this together quickly, and it could be a balancing number, but I'm not comfortable telling you it is until we talk to him. But we'll get back with you. That's an easy question, but he'll find the answer quickly.
Outstanding. Thank you, gentlemen. Where in the budget will we find the money for rehabbing the old Hardy School for our central office? What line is that? Where's that? Well, I know it's combined with other things, but where?
No, it's not combined with other things. There's going to be a grant. There still is a grant. We're still using grant funds for that. So you will not find that in proposed budget now unless we speak of, and Dr. Roberts, help me out, now unless we're speaking of the rollover on page.
Can I chime in, Dr. Coleman, while you're looking for that? So as we promised and committed, Mr. Colick, we would use state funds and a state grant, so we still have monies in that grant that we're currently using for the limited renovations for the new central office.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at more grant money for that as well.
That's exactly. There is
outside
no
of budget.
request in this budget for funding for CO Hardy.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And it is, thank you, Dr. Kramer, and it is pinpointed on page 39 on the FY25 proposed budget. That's going to be the carryover for school construction. That's 703. That is the proposed carryover. Once again, we're in motion using it, and as Dr. Kramer pointed out earlier, the budget is still a working document, so that number will still continue, but there will not be an increase in the budget.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Coleman. I appreciate that. I've got a ton, but if anyone else wants to, jump in and ask questions, or I'll keep going, it doesn't matter. Well, I'll ask one more while Mr. Worcester's getting his stuff together. Teacher class coverage, we're asking for 161,475. My notes show we originally discussed about $24,000. Am I wrong?
Yes, so those are two different things. So the 24,000 was for an additional block coverage for two teachers at Windsor High School to assist with covering an additional block. The additional class coverage was about the kind of more of a new initiative in order to provide daily block coverage for teachers who were covering when a substitute could not pick it up. We were going to pay the teachers for that.
Okay.
Yes.
I think me and Ms. Getz she'll have to explain it to me offline.
Okay.
I don't fully understand that. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Roberts, thank you for being here. I've got a few questions on the revenue estimates that were presented. Based on the changes that the board members received, and I just want to make sure this is just a typo. The original one we received said there was 15 new positions to be added, but this says 17. The funding numbers do not change, so is that just a simple misprint?
Are you looking?
17, 15.
I can pretty much address that. I think there were 3 positions that were added for the clinic assistants. Wasn't that at the end?
The library assistants
Library
were
assistant.
added, and then the food service additional position was removed. So
Oh.
it went from, you had 15, you added the 3, and then took the other one out.
Okay.
Food
That-
service wasn't taken out. It's in the grant, so it wasn't in the operating budget. So-
Right, right. I just want to make sure it's a misprint because the funding amount did not change.
So which, I'm sorry, so for which number is correct? 15?
17.
17 in the general fund.
Okay, so another question. As far as the revenue estimates go, for everything is based on the ADM, and I know you're not going to have the ADM until the end of this month. But in 21-22, it was 54-58. 22-23 was 54-60. So you're looking at 2-point difference. In 2025, it says it's projected to be 54-10, which is down another 50. Based on the ADM, can you please explain for the state revenue how you're getting to a 6.68% increase and locality funds being a 15.39% increase?
You mean because there are a few students in ADE, it went up so much? I can explain that. What you had was in the 23-24 year, which is this year, we had a 5% raise and a 10% raise. State revenue is generated primarily from, they look at every school, they determine how many students are going to be in that school based on ADM, and they determine how many teachers you're going to need for each school. They multiply that times a salary number, and because there was actually a 6% raise budgeted this year, they had to roll that into next year. So it went up primarily because of salary increases. So it overcame the loss of ADM. And in the 5410, we were just being conservative. It looks like we're going to be about 5410 this year. So the state actually projected less. The state projected 5366. So we had to recalculate all the state figures using 5410. So, but the increases in state revenue were primarily because of increases in teacher salaries and other salaries.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've got another question for you. And this may very well be something that I am overlooking or not seeing here, but looking at the changes from fiscal year 2024, you've got wages, benefits, other, and a total amount. This is the one that was sent out to the board members I'm reviewing right now.
Mr. Wooster, would you tell us which page are you looking at?
It is the one that was sent out to the board members yesterday.
26A.
Okay, that's the new 26A.
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 Yep.
Major changes.
Correct.
Right.
And would you repeat your question, please?
I haven't asked the question yet.
Okay.
I was going over it, and I was looking under the wages column. Everything adds up there. The other column, everything adds up. But under the benefits and the overall total, I'm getting completely different numbers. For the benefits section, it's showing a total of 605,504. But, and please explain to me how these numbers came to be, because when I add up the benefits column, it comes to 2,747,504. And the total, instead of being the 6,318,438, according to my calculations, comes up to 8,464,38.
So, Mr. Wooster, I believe the 16.62 to 14.21% column with the parentheses surrounding the 1.071 million, that should be applied as a negative.
Okay, so if you subtract that, then that would drop my numbers down to roughly 7 million. So it's still actually over. What am I missing here?
So you would need to double subtract it. Since you added it the first time, you would need to subtract it first to get back to status quo, then resubtract it to get down to where you were.
Okay. Is there any way to, when you put this out, can you clarify that a little bit better? Because me sitting here looking at it, and I'm certain the public's looking at it going, the numbers just don't add up. But thank you for clarifying that.
We could probably put that number in red. It might make it clearer.
Okay. That sounds good.
Could someone give me a general overview of the VRS reductions? Listen, I'm a retired military guy. I don't understand anything about the Virginia retirement system, so speak to me like I don't have a clue. I don't understand what the reductions are all about. So putting myself on report and showing you how much I don't know.
So with VRS, the portion that we have to contribute is based on rates, and the rates are going down next year. So there's a percentage that they're decreasing what our rate is going to be that we have to contribute.
Okay, so that's our contribution, just as simple as that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Ms. Sullivan, I think most of my questions are going to be focused on you. I don't believe I know most of the answers, but not everyone will, and I think most of this is going to be on your SOQ positions. On page 9, almost to the bottom, we've got SOQ positions for operation, maintenance, technical, and clerical. We've got 31.88 delta. So I think most of those are bus drivers. Can you explain that for the public?
Yeah, so the technical and clerical under operational maintenance are any of those positions that perform technical or clerical work. Bus drivers are a huge portion of that. And we do have an extensive amount more than what is allocated to us. And part of that potentially is that we geographically are a larger area that we have to cover in order for us to have enough bus routes to cover that in an adequate amount of time where students aren't spending, hours upon hours on buses longer than they already are. We have to have more bus drivers in order to make up for that.
So the short story is the state's SOQ calculation for bus drivers is flawed for Isle of Wight County.
Yes, as you'll remember from previous conversations from the JLARC study that we've talked about several times, the SOQ model is understood to be flawed at every level with every amount of staffing, and it is not something that they are going to continue to use in the future. However, it is what they have for right now.
Thank you.
And if I could add a little bit to that.
Absolutely, sir.
Mr. Collick made a point of saying not put pressure on the Board of Supervisors. I totally agree, but the pressure needs to be to Richmond. They're underfunding schools and have done so for years, particularly since the downturn in 2008, 9, 10. They've never restored that funding, and it has fallen to the locality to keep the schools solvent. It's almost criminal what happened.
Dr.
Sorry,
Roberts, you're 100% right, and I think a few of us routinely are talking with the legislators about this. about the SRQ, so thank you.
Oh, same question, page 12 for special education eds. Why do we have a 61.61 delta?
So special education IAs or aides, they are based on compliance. The state does not take into consideration anything about a student's IEP and the requirements that might be associated with that when it comes to a student's need. They simply look at the size of our division and allocate a specific number based on the ADM that we have. They don't take into any account the severity of a student's disability and what that might require in terms of a one-on-one. If a student walks in tomorrow with an IEP that states that they have to have a one-on-one, we have to provide that and make sure that that happens. And so our numbers are based on compliance and not based on the number of students we simply have in our school division.
Thank you. And then I do believe on page 10, there's a 14.67 delta on kindergarten aides. I believe some of those are that's a tongue twister, are our IAs from last year, correct?
They're not. So our IAs from last year are first and second grade IAs.
Okay.
Our kindergarten IAs are ones that, so first and second grade IAs are not required at all by the state, which means they're all locally funded. But the kindergarten IAs, they do have a portion of those that they fund to us. The state, ours are part-time actually, and so when you're looking at that number, it's actually not as large of a delta because they're funding 5.3 full-time positions. We only have kindergarten IAs that are in for part-time positions. And we partner one kindergarten IA for every kindergarten class. So as you'll see underneath of that, we're higher on our kindergarten teachers, which means then we are above on our kindergarten aides as well. And the kindergarten IAs are only funded by the state when you reach 29 kindergarteners. So 29 5-year-olds in one classroom is when they will allocate you a kindergarten IA on average. And so that's the reason why that number is so low.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes,
could
sir.
piggyback. Ms. Sullivan, just for clarification, this 14.67, are that FTEs or individuals?
They're FTEs.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Page 12, there's a delta for vocational education teachers. I think that's a reflection on our CTE program in a positive light when you get right down to it, right?
Yes.
We've got quite a few more CTE instructors than we need,
Yes,
or are funded for.
Yes, so obviously the CTE programs are something that we have taken a lot of, that we've supported and that we've taken a lot of pride in our program, and in order to do that, we had to staff it.
Yeah. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Ms. Sullivan, staying on the vocational education teachers, looking at the number 20 for actual instructional positions, are those currently in position now, or is that including the CTE instructional assistants as well?
No, so these numbers are based off of the November report that we did. These numbers are actuals from then. These
Okay.
do not include any new positions in any
So the
of these numbers.
proposals are not included?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The proposed are included in the budget, not in this.
Okay.
All those positions are filled currently?
All of our CTE positions are filled.
You're not including any empty spaces in any of these numbers, not just for that, in that whole section?
So no, these were actuals as of November.
Okay.
Should I correct that?
Mr. Marsh, if I could, this chart, we put this chart in mainly because this is exactly what the JLOC study was talking about. The state underfunds by calculating numbers of positions necessary, and they undercalculate by thousands of positions across the state. This is not just Isle of Wight, this is everywhere. And so it's just really a good indicator of what the JLOC study was talking about.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate you echoing that. And our friends at the county, they understand that too. We've discussed this at length with them. It was fall last year, maybe even spring, I forget, time slips me by, but. Page 39, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. Top line for Virginia all-in, the FY24 budget, that's the $1.8 million we were awarded for all-in. For the proposed, that $850, that's not new money, right? That's carryover because we've got 2 years for that.
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right. That's right.
And that could be more than 850,000. That's just an estimate based on what we think we might use this year. We will carry over the rest to be used for next year for tutoring our students.
I'm not quite sure how to explain this. In my mind, the question makes sense. It may not make sense coming out of my mouth. I know that's not new money. Is it going to show an overall increase? In other words, is that $850,000 going to show up as new money on the bottom line? We already got that money this year, right?
Right.
So does it show up on the overall budget as revenue as new money?
No, it's carryover money. So it means that we spent about 1 million, a little bit less than 1 million of the 1.8, or projected to do so, and we'll have that much left. We have 2 years to spend this.
Gotcha.
And if I'm correct, that's also grant. That's why it's in the grant section as well.
Okay, here's one. So last year, there was much discussion when we took 2 unfilled positions and we repurposed them into deans of students. And then we took 3 unfilled positions and repurposed them into school safety officers. Where are those? Have those positions in the system been reallocated? Now they're deans and SSOs. They aren't what they were before.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So position numbers that were allocated for those positions were either changed or deactivated, and the new positions were created.
Got it. Doc Roberts, you and Mr. Jenkins and everybody involved, you guys completely restructured from last year's budget. It's good. I'm happy with what you did. What I'm struggling to capture in my mind is last year we had a designated capital maintenance fund of $250,000. How did you capture that into your current format?
In the grant, on the grants, we had the capital maintenance budget separately on page 40. We tried to structure it as close as we could, but we felt as though some changes were necessary to meet state standards. So this was one of them. And this, I think this is how it was presented last year as well as a capital maintenance budget. Dr.
It is, Chair Marsh. And on page 40, the very last bottom, unplanned capital needs, that is the number that was 250 in previous years. That is the number that we are requesting to increase to 500 for FY25. And then in addition to that are all of the one-time expenses.
Got it. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
May I just add a point to that,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair? Just to highlight, as we've discussed, the 250 is insufficient. We discussed that we've already exhausted that basically on repairs that were needed. First day of school, we had a well that was eaten up, probably close to half of that amount of money, and we've had other expenses that have completely exhausted that. So that's why we're requesting additional funds, because the 250 that has been in the budget is insufficient.
Right. And if I could piggyback.
And I know you know that, you all know that, I'm just stating that for the public's information.
Right. Now, Mr. Christensen, this, the unplanned capital needs, that $500,000 that you've got there, is that for just the bigger projects, or is that for work orders that come up?
No, work orders we have budgeted into the system. So we put a certain amount under contracted services in the operations fund.
Okay.
We base it off historic knowledge and say, hey, this is how much we think we're going to need to repair anything that comes through a standard work order. These are for more major one-time expenses that we don't know what's going to happen. We know
Right.
things are going to break during the course of next year, but we don't know the well's
Right.
going to break. We don't know we're going to have a major plumbing issue. You understand?
Right, you pretty much know about how much you're going to spend, you just don't know what you're going to spend it on.
That's correct. And then we don't know what's going to go
Right.
really wrong that we say,
Yep.
hey, we didn't have that in the
Right,
budget.
okay.
Yes, sir.
Yep, I think Dr. Coleman and I discussed that at the last meeting. Thank you.
It was my understanding, I could be wrong, did the Board of Supervisors say that they would replenish that fund if it was needed, if you ran out?
The agreement was, anytime the fund is completely gone, if there's an incident, we will go before the school board and ask permission to go to the Board of Supervisors and request those funds. That's what we have done in the past. A lot of times, issues may arise that, let's just say that we're out of the 250 and a chiller goes out. So I have to wait for the next meeting to actually request permission to go to the Board of Supervisors, wait on their meeting, and to request from them to actually raise the amount or to give us the quoted amount that we have for that chiller. At the same time, although different things of insurance might cover it, but we have to actually still incur losses on that until we can get refunded the money. So to answer your question, yes, it will be replenished, but not as a whole, as quoted amounts as needed after the 250.
And if I may add one other item on that recommended increase, at least a portion of that recommended increase is going to come from our CTE equipment. The CTE equipment we know is very costly. If something does need to be replaced in our CTE program, that's another, we could utilize those funds for that purpose. So in addition to having the 9 schools and CO to maintain, we now have very costly CTE equipment to maintain. So it just increases the risk of our unexpected one-time expenses because we have more capital to under our umbrella.
Mr. Christensen, do we have a maintenance and replacement schedule for our CTE equipment?
We do. We're working on that with our facilities coordinator. He's working with ABM. It's part of the work order system. They're working with our CT instructors to get on a scheduled preventative maintenance and replacement schedule, yes.
Okay, because in my mind, I think if we need new equipment, we need to put it in the budget, not so much in the unplanned area, especially if we know, some of these things are not going to last another year.
No, this would be separate from that. This would be some sort of unexpected
Okay.
issue that happens that we didn't know that was going to happen. Like what happened at the land lab would be a
Okay.
great example.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Dr. Roberts, on page 26, and I recognize this is all fluid, but for FY '25 proposed ask of local county funds, we've got 35, 695, 378. That's what we're asking of the county as per this document. In the back, oh goodness gracious, page 41 under the textbook fund, there's a local match, $320,899. Is that $320,000 in addition to the 35,695 on page 26?
No, sir.
It's
I mean,
all-
yes, it is an addition. It's not included in the 35,695.
Okay, so that's an addition, so.
Right.
Okay, that's important to know, I think. Are there any other instances that you're aware of like that, where there's a local match that's not captured?
No, that's the only, in the history that we could find, that's the only one that goes straight to the county. It must be a reason in history why it was done that way. I've never seen it done that way. The textbook fund is separately funded based on the state estimate for what the county's share is. But it's a good practice.
Okay, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, on page 26A, major changes, it's listing school buses 5 for $735,000. Also, under one-time expenses, it's listing 15 buses for $2.2 million. Is that 5 part of the 15, or are we looking at 20 buses?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we're looking for 20 total. The idea here is to build back into our operating budget a number that we feel like is going to replenish our fleet on a regular basis. After discussion with Mr. Fike and Andrew Sullivan, we feel like 5 is the appropriate number to have built into our operating budget. But as we've well documented, in addition to that, we're in an urgent need for one-time bus replenishment, and that is where the 15 comes into play. So a total of 20.
Okay.
Mr. Christensen, if we were to do that and we got 20 buses, next year, then in 10, 15 years, as the life expectancy is up, we're going to be looking for 20 buses again.
Yes, and so that is the what Mr. Sullivan, when he's been here, has presented.
Right.
That if you do a surge purchase, I believe as he refers to it as, you get off cycle. We understand that. What we're going to try to do is build the 5 into the operating budget so that we can rotate through them on a regular basis and get back on a sustainable cycle so that we don't have to do any more surge purchases. But I understand what you're saying. If you buy them all now, they're going to age at the same time.
Now, if we were to ask the county if they could buy us 5, outside the budget, we put 5 in the budget this year and every year afterwards, do we have both the capability and capacity to transport our students safely and effectively for the next couple of years as we're building that?
We'll do the best we can with what we have, but what we're going to have is potentially...
I know we'll do the best we can, but do we have that capability to keep them on the road and the capacity, the right number of buses that may not have to be fixed more often, but can we do that?
So the answer is that we would like 20 buses now. That is what we've discussed with our fleet supervisor. Right. If we were given 5 now, what would happen is we would get those on the road, we would incorporate those into the fleet, but we're going to have breakdowns, and there's going to be more double backs, just as happened this year. There's going to be kids late to school. We're all going to get phone calls and emails. We need those buses because we know that the majority of our fleet is past its life cycle.
If we can get 10, and I don't know what the answer is. Maybe we can get 20, or 15, But if I'm just worst case scenario, I want to know exactly what our worst case is. So when Mr. Marsh and I, it's the Finance Committee, are talking with the Board of Supervisors, we can let them know this is liability for us.
And, Mr. Collick, we hear your question loud and clear. Mr. Fike might add a little bit more to the conversation. I know that you're trying to narrow down to exactly the pinpoint to stir that conversation of getting those buses. I believe that Mr. Fike can answer a little bit more clarified.
Yeah, I basically want to know what's our worst case scenario.
Yeah, so it's certainly it's something that's a little hard to put a numeric value on it. Kind of like Mr. Christensen alluded to, we will make do with what we have. If we are still limited, let's say we don't get very many new buses, we don't get what we're asking for, we'll still run, but the buses are going to be loaded up. We're not going to be able to hire any new drivers as our county expands. And really, it's kind of a trickle-down effect because when you have your buses loaded up, you condense routes. Then when you have a driver out, it's harder to cover the whole route. Then you have to overload the other buses. So really, it kind of affects everything, I guess, is the best way to say it.
And with the bus fleet that we have right now, and I know they break down routinely, and you guys are getting in fixing them. When are we gonna have to say we can't fix these buses? Is ultimately my question. The capability and capacity. I know you have the capability.
Sure.
You've got a great staff there, but do we have the capacity to keep enough of these buses running? And I don't know the answer. If we can keep 10 of these that you want replaced, running for another 2 years, well, 5 a year, that would help. If we can't, well, we need to know that.
So it's getting harder and harder, of course, to get the parts for the 2007, 2008 buses. I'm confident we could keep them running, but it would not be pretty.
Okay.
Like Mr. Christensen alluded to, the double backs, the condensing the routes and everything, and it does get harder and harder to get these parts that you need. And then, of course, you have increased maintenance costs because, you're maintaining 17-year-old buses to keep them driving, and, it dramatically increases your cost of ownership at that point.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Fike.
Sure.
How many of those buses do we have that you're speaking about with the hard-to-find parts?
It's kind of depends on the make and the model of the bus, but I would say anything from 2010 and much older than that. It's hard to get some of the parts. Want to say about a third of our fleet is from 2010 or older. So roughly, I think maybe like the number's 19, 20 buses. And some of the parts trying to replace them, we get creative, right? We get creative, we operate within what we're allowed to do, but you have like the cosmetic parts, the plastic parts. So like we have some buses, you go over a bump and like the window comes down because the springs get brittle and they get weak and stuff like that. So like it's not all something that's going to have a tremendous effect on the operation of the bus, but sometimes we do have to take a vehicle off the road because we're having a very hard time finding the part that it is that needs replaced.
Okay.
I'd just like to follow up on that. I think the original number that we had discussed was 16 buses, is that correct?
I know back in the fall, I think it was 12,
Okay.
November, I believe.
Okay.
Right.
So now we're looking at a total of 20 buses total, which you're looking at a combined 5 on one page, 15 on another. You're looking at about 3 million for buses. If you could get 5 buses per year, that would be an additional 5 to the fleet you currently have. So that'll be 5 that shouldn't be breaking down. I would hope not, brand new vehicles. Me personally, I know we need vehicles, and this is not what people want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
We need it, but can we actually afford it? Can the county afford that much additional funding? That's what I'm looking at. If we get 5 each year and get it on a rotation, every 4 to 5 years, you'd be getting a new set of buses. If you get it on a rotation like that, how would that affect your fleet overall?
So if we got, let's say, 5 buses a year for the next 5-6 years or so, it would probably take us about that long to get caught up, because as the years progress, we're going to be halfway through 2024, 2025, 2026. I easily have 5 buses I can take off the road when the 5 new ones come in. But we're still going to be asking some of these really old buses to continue running through 2026, 2027. So if we actually got 5 buses a year, we would eventually get caught up. But it's going to take a little while, and it's not going to be pretty until then. But we're asking for a kind of a one-time catch-up, I guess, and I certainly understand the funding constraints that we're dealing with.
It doesn't specify, but the buses you would, whether you're looking at or what you would like, are those diesel buses?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that one. Diesel buses are good for 300 plus miles, 300,000.
Mm-hmm.
So time-wise, how long would it take, and I don't need a definite number, but how long would it take to put 300,000 miles on a bus?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think off the top of my head the number of buses we have over 300,000 miles. We have some of the older stuff I tell you about is still shy 300,000 in some case. So usually it's going to be the 15 years of age that puts it past the VDOE guidance. Wight County is big. We established that earlier in the meeting. We know we have longer routes. So if you have a brand new bus, we purchase it, and you drive it, for typical routes for the next probably 15 years or so, 16, 17 years, that's probably about how long it would take to get to 300,000. So usually it's the 15-year mark that gets us before the 300,000.
Okay. So if we could do the 5 per year, that would be well within the parameters then.
It would, like I said, it would get us caught up, but it's going to take a while. We're going to be relying on these really, really old ones till 2026, 2027. We're going to have to keep them going.
Since I got you, I've got another question for you, too.
Sure.
On page 37, looking at vehicle fuels, 23 actual was 658,547. 24 budget was 668,228. And I'm looking at a proposal for 25, which is lower at 588. Now, I remember a while back that there was concern or difficulty, being able to afford fuel costs. I don't see fuel going down in price. I keep paying more at the pump myself. Is that going to be an accurate number, or do we need to bump that up so we don't get in a bind later?
So obviously our fuel that we're using for our fleet is pretty much steady. So I've been told that decrease in amount from the 24 to the 25 budget was from the SSC, the previous company, was utilizing some of our fuel. That's what I've been told. And I don't know if you can speak to the current ABM arrangement.
So what I will say for that number is that in review of this document, that is one of the lines that I did highlight and bring to the attention of the team to say, hey, can we account for this decrease in fuel costs? Because nobody at this table said we don't need as much fuel as we have for FY24. So as part of this budget process, part of it is going to be going back in, refining our estimates, saying where do we need to adjust numbers going forward, and there was no deliberate decrease in fuel cost. It's one of those numbers we need to go back in and look at.
Okay.
And Mr. Wooster, if I could just add one more thing. When you were discussing the 5 vehicles, the 5 buses that is, and then keeping the current staff on the road, as Mr. Fike alluded to, those vehicles are going to be a little bit older. So with those older vehicles will be repairs. So if we're going to not just words to think about, if we're not going to go with more buses for replacement, just keep in mind that we will need to increase on materials and supplies to keep those buses rolling. There will be more springs, just for one instance, to keep those buses up and going. This is something to keep in mind if we don't go with a higher number of buses, because as you stated, the newer buses will not break down as much. We already know the older buses will. So if we're going to keep those on the road a little bit longer, we just want to make sure that we have the funds in place to keep them running.
You just sparked another question I've got.
There you go, Fike.
Mr. Fike, when you get a new school bus in, what type of warranty comes with that bus? Manufacturer's warranty?
Yeah, so I know, so in this position, I haven't received a new school bus yet. It'll happen, though. We're crossing our fingers. We're hoping. So I'm going to speak from my memory of our recent school buses. We had a couple special education buses. I think they've been around about a year and a half or so. So I know there is a pretty extensive warranty that covers some of the basic functions of the bus, so forth. I know at one point we did have to send a bus back to the manufacturer. It was not a major repair. It was something we could have done, but it was covered, and essentially if they're going to pay for it and they're going to do the labor, we get it back to them. So yeah, the buses do come under warranty. I'm thinking of some of the Bluebirds that we have too. We've sent a couple of those back to the manufacturer up in Petersburg. In most cases, it's been covered. There was a bus, and I guess it probably would have been maybe outside of the 5-year period. We had like a 2018, 2019 bus that needed a new engine, and it was something that we had to actually pay for. So it just fell outside of the warranty.
Right. I mean, it's no secret. We need buses. Mm-hmm. I don't see getting all of them at one time. What do you see wearing out first? Is it suspension? Is it frame? Is it just cosmetics? What are you looking at there?
So I know a lot of the problems kind of connect to the engine compartment. I wish Mr. Sullivan was here. He could speak to it a whole lot better than I could. I'm not super strong on the mechanical stuff, but we have the big expenses that come about. One of our buses sitting in our yard right now needs a new fuel pump. So you're looking at stuff like that. So it just kind of eats up our budget, and then, we don't have the money to maintain them quite as well as we want to with the other ones.
Okay. I was just curious because I have worked as a mechanic for several years in the past.
Sure.
So I do have a very good understanding.
Okay.
That's all I've got for now.
What's the lead time on getting those? When you place the order, how long does it take to get the new bus?
The new school buses. So we're usually looking about 12 months or so. So there were buses that were ordered last May, last June, the end of last school year. We're hoping that they come in maybe by the end of this school year. So about a year, roughly. So, and of course, we talked about earlier, we were asking for 12 buses in the fall. Now it's up to 20. So, when I made that original proposal, that was probably 4 or 5 months ago or so. So right now we're trying to kind of predict, looking at the situation we're in right now in March of 2024 and looking at the situation we're going to be in 2025, 2026, 2027. We're planning for years ahead.
Okay, Mr. Fike, you're off the hook this time.
All right. Thank you.
I've just got a general statement, not a question. Going through the budget, I've seen areas for athletics. I've seen areas for fields, tracks, and we definitely need it. But I would request that we go back and look at something for the band. I do not see that anywhere in the budget, and I'd like to put that request in that we go back, review it, and see if we cannot add something in there.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wooster. We'll certainly have that conversation. We'll have a discussion with Dr. Kale, with Principal Cuffey, and we will take a look at that.
Okay, I guess it's back to me. So back to the slides where it says major changes, general fund. The very bottom entry, it says other changes in pay and benefits, and it's almost $600,000. What is that?
Could you tell us where you're looking? I'm sorry, it was...
I'm looking at your slides, Dr. Kramer.
Okay.
Okay, on a major changes, let me count up how many slides in it is.
Right up to the revenue estimates, okay.
Yeah, it's on the VRS reductions at the
Okay.
top.
And would you repeat your question,
Yeah,
please?
the bottom entry where it says other changes in pay and benefits, what is that? I mean, over $500,000, that's a lot of money, so I'd like to know what changes.
Yes, sir. It's a very good question. It's a question that I asked myself to the team as we were reviewing these documents. And so what that number accounts for is going to be what we've done is we've gone in and actually looked at the position control, which identifies our exact employees, their exact salaries, their exact benefits, and said, what will that cost for FY25? So the items you're seeing here is essentially a true-up from this year for what needed to be funded for FY24 versus, 25 versus 24, and then adding into whatever the increases would be for the 3% for next year.
That would be included within the wages and salaries and the employee benefits?
The wages and salaries and employee benefits are specific for the 3% raise. This is separate from the 3% raise. This is going to be items that we went in and looked specifically at the position control and said, this is what it will cost for next year versus what we have budgeted for this year, and what you're seeing is the variance.
Okay, I'll have to talk to you some more on that.
I can give you an example if you'd like.
Yes, please.
So when the budget was designed last year, we would have gone based off of what positions or salaries we had in there. And so, for example, if we had a teacher who was in their 5th year and decided that education was no longer for them, and we by chance hired someone who had 15 years of experience, there would be quite a variance in their salary that we would have not budgeted for last year, not knowing what position was going to leave and what we were going to get. In our particular pay scale, a first-year teacher is at 49, 30 years at 85. That's a huge range.
Sure.
That makes it very difficult to budget that specifically for. And so in a couple of situations where that happened, and as you all know, we've said several times that we are more appealing to people who have 15 years and above when it comes to pay than a lot of our neighboring divisions, because we do pay at the higher end for that. And so there's several instances where that happened.
Okay. So basically, salary variances, okay.
If you
that
don't
makes
mind, John, piggybacking on that, we're getting the teachers with more experience. What are we doing to keep them? We have the signing bonus proposed, but there's no retention bonus in there. Why is that?
Yeah, so I'd love to be able to offer a retention bonus. That is built in some ways with the step increase. So you get a step increase for every year that you stay. And on our pay scale, 15 years and above get a larger step. There's a greater variance between step 15 and 16 than there is between 1 and 2. And so our scale has a natural retention step built in if we're able to give that step. Last year we were not able to give the step. We have added that this year so that on top of the 3%, our teachers will then, or those on the instructional pay scale, will see an additional increase of that. As far as the signing bonuses go, we also do offer the referral bonus, or that's what we did last year, and if we were approved for that, we would want to continue to do that. And so employees were given a bonus if they helped with the assisting and referring a new employee to our school division.
How many employees received the signing bonuses or referral bonuses last year?
I want to say 21 signing bonuses, if I'm remembering correctly from the quad chart, and I think we had 10 referral bonuses. But I'd have to go back. So we had, several employees who were hired that got signing bonuses that said no one referred them. They just joined on their own.
Sure.
But I would have to go back to the quad chart to look at that specifically, but it's around that number.
Okay, no, that's a good estimate. That's pretty much what I'm looking
And the
at.
signing bonuses, if I remember correctly, they had to stay a certain amount of time or they had to pay it back.
Yeah, so they had to finish out their contract this year, so they had to complete that 1-year contract with us, or they had to return the signing bonus, which we did have 2 employees that happened with.
Okay. After-school programs. This is a new, would be something new?
That would be Mr. Colley. So we have a number of after-school initiatives and programs. Unfortunately, they're not funded. So certainly consideration for 9 of our schools who are providing opportunities for students after school. This would provide resources for transportation, for stipends for teachers who are providing those supports, et cetera.
Okay, so it's something we're already doing, but we don't put money towards it?
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, because right now, I would really like to make sure we shore up all the programs we have before we start anything new. And I would second what Mr. Worcester asked about the band. I know that kids that are in music generally do better in school. And from my own experience with my own kids, when they went and learned musical instruments, their academics picked up pretty quick. So I think there's a connection there, and so I would really like to see something, pushed out there for the kids, with the understanding that the families have to pick up some of the tab as well, particularly for the personal instruments.
Where did the funds come from now for the after-school programs?
Perhaps Mrs. Getz can help me out, or Mrs. Sullivan. I think a variety of places. I think the United Way is providing some support in certain places, perhaps some local grants. But again, systemically, across the board, we are not providing funding for all 9 of our schools.
So we also have the supplemental pay scale and supplemental funds that are attached to that. And so we provide funding for specific clubs or specific athletic events, and that's where, or athletic coaching that comes from supplemental pay. So this would just be in addition to that, I believe, is what Dr. Kramer is sharing.
So, like, for example, Great Computer Challenge, we do provide a stipend for those teachers to stay after school and work with those students. But like GTMS has a basketball club, there's no stipend for that. There's also no transportation for any of these after-school activities.
And I think that's a major point. So
Right.
providing an opportunity for students to be able to be transported or lack thereof excludes a number of our students and families.
I'd like to talk about supplemental pay for just a second, Ms. Sullivan, since you brought it up. So we're looking at going from about $1.5 million overall in supplemental pay. I'm talking total. I added it up from the budget. It's nowhere in there totaled up. Almost $2 million. So it's about a 27% increase. And I'm just curious as to why. We've got the inflation rate is 3.1%. And so I'd like to see more of our increases in line with inflation than well above it. So I'm just curious on that. And we can talk about this separately on an individual basis if we need to.
I can provide some information that might be helpful. So there's several supplements that we offer our employees. One is a degree supplement.
Right.
So if you have an advanced degree, so that's factored in. And I did notice in there that there was an increase in that. And I think primarily due to the fact that they're looking at the actuals, and then the increases, like if a teacher goes and gets their master's degree, we have to honor that. And so that increase. And so if we are bringing in more teachers and more staff in general that are applicable for that increase, they're going to be given that, and so that increase would exist.
Yes, and all of what Ms. Sullivan said is true. And then I would add, in addition to that, the what you see on the major changes tab, the signing bonuses and teacher coverage, the 200,000 and 150,000, total of 350,000. Those are being classified as supplemental salaries as well. So that's going to account for the vast increase that you see in that specific category.
All right, let me make a note of that.
Because those have to be treated as wages. They get taxed in their paycheck just as their other
Okay. And you said the signing bonuses and teacher coverage? were
Yes,
the
sir.
two? Okay.
So on page 37, where it goes up for the supplemental pay, is that in addition to the other page with the new stuff?
No, ma'am, that's included within there.
Okay. Okay, so basically what you're telling me is this is a mandatory thing for us because of our contracts with the teachers and the supplements that we pay for those that are involved in extracurricular activities and such, correct?
So because the extra coverage, the block coverage, and because the signing bonuses are included in that, if you were to say, we don't want to support those two things, you would then subtract that amount from the total here, because and that would be the significant difference there.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you. Let's see. We had a couple people talk earlier today, and so I made a couple notes. The clinician salary, was that on Dr. Kramer's slides? Is it the SPED clinician pay adjustment? Is that what?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, very good. Already. Internships, okay. That was the only question that I had from there. So utilities, and I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's a significant increase, and I'm trying to find it, but I can't find it on my spreadsheet. It's a significant increase from the current year. And I am just wondering, did we realize a significant difference, or are we anticipating a significant difference? Here we are. The current year, we've allocated 1.7 million, and we want to go to 1.9, so that's 11%. So are we seeing that increase at that rate, at about 11%?
Yes, and not only that, if Jess, I think you're reading from page 37. If you look at page 37, you'll see the FY23 was 1677 when it comes to utilities. Then it goes to the next year 1725, and now 1920. Now, one thing that that you realize is at one time this past year, we were running 2 Hardys, if you want to look at it. We're running Hardy Elementary School and we're running New Hardy at the same time. So
Right.
do we know the proposed utility costs of Hardy at this time in full swing? No, we do not. We have some data for that, but at the same time, everything wasn't fully running. At one time, the construction company was still paying the bills on the utilities and different things for Hardy Elementary School, but now we are literally paying all of the bills for Hardy Elementary School. So if you look at the base cost of the 23 actual to the budgeted 24 now to the 25, you'll see there's a slight closeness in that.
Okay, so, but we have a good basis
Yes,
for raising it, like,
absolutely, yes, sir.
okay, very good. And, well, let me ask that other question then that we've been asking all along. So I go back to 26A, and we want to add 195,000 to it. So that would be in addition to the 1.9, correct? So that would put us at $2 million?
No, that's included in.
That is included.
Everything's included in, yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Good to go. If anybody else wants to pick up, I can take a break.
Okay, under major changes, general fund, new positions, I'm looking at math interventionist, history, 3 SPED inclusion, SPED self-contained, 2 reading specialists, 4 IAs, 1 accountant, 3 library assistants. Then you get to the patient care technician instructor. For clarification, has that position already been filled?
No, it has not. That is part of the grant that we talked about, and if we did not fill, we received funds for the facility and for improving that. If we do not hire the teacher, we will have to return the $90,000 in grant funds if we don't finish out the program.
Okay. What I'm not seeing on here are the 3 instructional assistants, 1 for building trades, 1 for welding, and 1 for cosmetology. Why are they not on there?
Yeah, so when we knew that the budget was looking extremely high, and we have been told over and over that we can't fund everything, those were on our list of things that are not as hot, not that we don't need them, not that we don't want them, but they're not as high of a priority as some of these other positions that are actually required by law. Those positions are not required by law.
They're not required, but there's a potential to be in a situation where you would be without an instructor yet again. I would recommend having them on there.
Yeah.
In the absence of a teacher, the IA would not be able to necessarily fulfill that role. They wouldn't be qualified. Just as though in the recent situation we had where the teacher was absent, we had a substitute in their place, and they were the same certification level that we would have a person that we would hire as an IA, and they are not capable, or they're not qualified to fulfill that requirement. So that would not provide you with that safety net that you, I think, are looking for and that we wish we could have. You would have to hire 2 teachers in order to have that happen.
And if the board deems those are a priority for the board, we can certainly look to add them in. We were trying to prioritize, as we had been asked to do, about what our real needs are.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, I've looked through the budget, and there's several areas that I could see reducing, which would compensate for that.
And again, like, we were looking at it from, our lens and what we thought was a priority over others. And again, that we're probably not going to all have the same views. And if the board decides that's what, an area they want, we can add it back into the budget.
We're preparing this budget for the board. This
Well,
is the superintendent's proposed budget. So if the board determines that they would like to have a particular position or positions, we will act accordingly.
Yeah, it's ultimately up to the board. It's not up to me, not an individual. It's up to the board as a whole. But just so I'm clear, there's nothing on this page that I would disagree with, if that makes you feel a little bit better.
For clarification on that, on these positions, which ones are we required? Are there any of these that, like the patient care, we're required, or we have to return that grant money? Or
That's
any of
true.
these along those lines of, we're going to, you know what I'm saying? A negative effect.
Yeah, I mean, like the self-contained sped class at Carsville, we could get by without that. We don't have it this year. But it was a situation where I was telling you about. We have 2 students who live in Carsville. We have to transport them all the way to Hardy Elementary to receive their services. So it's those kinds of situations. Can we get by? We could. And if I had to prioritize, that would probably be one that I would say maybe we don't get. You know, the 3 SPED inclusion teachers we have to have. We have to have. Those are based on numbers and the IAs that go with them. That is to be compliant with the law. We must have those. The reading specialists, that's part of the Virginia Literacy Act, that we have to add those. So I can't really have flexibility there. The history teacher at Smithville High School, we need it. Do we allow numbers to increase so that we don't get it? I mean, again, those are things that we have to make decisions on, I guess. Same thing, the math interventionists. West Side, I'll just say, West Side 4th graders do not get math intervention services. Every other 4th grader in this county has the opportunity, if needed, to receive math intervention services. I think that's a problem, but again, that would have to be a decision.
You could take in 5. We'll take a quick 5-minute recess for potty break. All right, let's wrap this up, folks. Ms. Perkins, you had a question or two you wanted to drop in there? You don't have to. Nope.
Yeah. Okay, going to grant revenues, and I could be asking this completely wrong. The auditor's comments about the applications for grant revenues for the FY 2023 books. I believe they mentioned we submitted approximately $3.4 million in grant applications in December. Am I right so far?
You're asking about the audit?
The grant applications specifically, the grant applications, that amount was about $3.4 million. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. Even though they were submitted late, the auditor allowed the application monies to be accrued before closing the books on 2023. Had this not happened, our carryover deficit would have been much higher. When will we see the results on these late applications?
We will be providing the board with an update. We've had a conversation with the individual, the contractor who's coming in to provide supports in child nutrition services. So there will be an update to the board at the April board meeting.
Okay. If some of the money sought aren't awarded, does that increase our current carryover deficit? Have we been awarded everything, or are there any that haven't been awarded?
I think the deficit was operating only, if I'm not, is that right?
Would you just repeat that?
The deficit was operating only. It had nothing to do with the grant.
Correct, that's right. Yes, that had nothing to do with the deficit. Is just currently they're, what, $345,000 that's current for the operating budget. So the grant has nothing to do with the deficit. But there was a finding that we're responding to separate from the deficit in the audit report. And again, we will provide an update on where we are in terms of corrective actions regarding the state and their expectations.
Okay, and how anything affects any possible effect on the budget as well, if there is any.
Well, again, that's for grants, so yes.
There won't be.
Pardon?
So there won't be.
Yes, there will not be.
Okay.
The grant is separate from the operating budget.
Good. Anybody else?
No, I just have a myriad of questions, but most of them are very minute. And so I talked to Dr. Kramer, Dr. Roberts, and I would just like to come on in and meet with Dr. Coleman, Ms. Getz, Ms. Sullivan, and Dr. Roberts on Monday morning and go over this. I do have a lot of questions, and I don't want to waste people's time here tonight because most of these are because I'm not familiar with this. With the budgeting, and I do have some very specific questions because, you know, I'm looking at cost of living going up 3%, and a lot of increases are, you know, a lot more than 3%, and so I just, you know, want to find out what's going on there. So we're going to meet Monday morning, and Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we announce another meeting for next Thursday in addition to Tuesday's meeting as a backup, just in case we don't have time to vote, because I just have a feeling we'll be doing some more discussion next Tuesday, or I would at least hope, learning more. And I know I'm going back home this weekend. I'm going to be going through all these notes, watching this video a couple times over, and trying to put down what I think are the priorities from my perspective. And I think another meeting like this might be a little bit, you know, beneficial.
I don't think it's unreasonable to pencil in a tentative date, but I think we should certainly shoot for next Tuesday for the sake of time.
Absolutely, don't disagree with that at all.
Mr. Chair, Mayor, I would be very concerned about potentially extending this to Thursday. The budget is due to the county, and Friday is the deadline. Staff and I are making ourselves fully available to any of you. So we, as a reminder, we extend ourselves to answer any questions. But I think looking to next week beyond Tuesday is going to be somewhat precarious and dangerous if we are waiting until the very last minute. And I totally understand, and you all have been very patient with us, but given the changes with personnel and finance, it's extended this time. So I appreciate your patience, but I would be very concerned if we go beyond Tuesday. Again, we are making ourselves fully available, whether it's in person, whether it's virtual, to answer any questions you might have. But I think we would be in dangerous territory if we extend this beyond Tuesday.
Thanks, Doc. And, yeah, again, I think we should certainly aim for Tuesday. We've all discussed separately, and I'll get a hold of Mr. Cunningham this evening or tomorrow. I will send out to everybody individually that spreadsheet. I would ask each board member go through there, and now that we've had public hearing, go through there and check your priorities, number them, 1 being my top priority, and however many there are would be your lowest priority. That way everybody's got a voice. At the end of the day, we're going to have to get some sort of a figure from the county. Those folks don't have that number yet. They don't know what kind of revenue is going to be generated. So as long as we've got the budget adopted and we've got it prioritized and submitted to the county, when those folks up there come back with a number and say we can do this but no more, we've already got it prioritized, and we'll just start whacking off from the bottom, and it's just the way it's going to have to be. Concur?
At this point, I don't think we can do anything other than that. So we just draw a line wherever the money ends, and everything above that line is in the budget. Everything below it falls off.
Yeah. Ms. Perkins, you concur?
I mean, that's the situation we're in, but we do need to make it known to the public that we are doing the best we can, and we don't plan to back the Board of Supervisors into a corner. It's more of we may not have gone fully into the budget and made necessary cuts, so there's no intent to put the pressure on the Board of Supervisors. It's just the time constraints that we have at this point, and we're going to work together with them.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Mr. Chair, if I may, on a spreadsheet, that I will send to you separately for myself will be any recommendations as far as the spending goes, because we've got the FY 2025 proposal, and I'm looking at every single one of those lines individually and looking at the overall percentage, and there are going to be some areas that I will recommend that we lower. We lower them numbers. I know it's not going to be very popular, but I think in some of those areas we might be able to do that, and they will be my recommendations.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Any other last comments for anybody, staff? Okay, so we'll call it a night, and I'll get up early tomorrow before work, and I'll resend out that spreadsheet, and we'll go from there. And on that, meeting is adjourned.